Do you remember that hair-raising moment when Daniel Weston finally stepped out of the shadows to confront the ruthless Iron Cobras? The sight of one man, calm, composed, yet radiating a fierce determination to protect his daughter and his home, was enough to leave everyone at the Harvest Festival holding their breath. It's that pivotal scene where courage meets skill, and it changes the entire fate of Crystal Valley. If you're eager to uncover every twist and turn of this gripping tale, stay with us until the very end. You won't believe how this small farming community fights back against a gang of ex-military professionals. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support our channel, Farmer's Story, where we share captivating adventures set in the rural heartland. By subscribing, you'll never miss an update, and you'll always be first in line to hear our latest, most exciting stories. They say that the true strength often hides beneath a peaceful surface, power revealed only when danger arrives. For Rebecca Weston, age 23, a crisp autumn morning at Crystal Valley's annual Harvest Festival was supposed to be the highlight of the season. Rows of fresh produce sparkled with morning dew, and local craftspeople arranged their displays under the golden sunlight. Rebecca, her auburn hair pinned in a practical ponytail, moved confidently among her stands, greeting regular customers and curious tourists alike. She glanced at a short text on her phone from her father. "Looks good, sweetheart. Finishing up a few chores at the farm. Be there soon." His brevity stemmed from a 20-year career as a Navy SEAL, a habit that stayed with Daniel Weston even 5 years after retiring. While most people knew Daniel as a hardworking farmer, Rebecca alone understood just how prepared he remained to face threats most townsfolk couldn't imagine. "Your father has a gift for the soil," observed Mrs. Aldridge, an elderly neighbor who had shown up for her traditional first purchase ritual, picking out the best tomatoes. "It's still hard to believe he spent so many years away from this land." "Dad says farming gives him peace," Rebecca replied, recalling how Daniel walked the rows in the evenings, calm but ever watchful. She kept to herself the detail of the security systems he'd quietly installed, or how his eyes scanned every door, window, and crowd, a vigilance he had tried to pass on to her. As the sun crept higher, Sheriff Logan Miles strolled over with an uneasy expression. "Morning, Rebecca. Everything all right?" he asked, hefting a bag of apples as he spoke. "We've had reports of motorcycles prowling around the county roads. Nothing major, but, well, I'm here to make sure nothing's amiss." "Any idea if it's the Iron Cobras?" Rebecca asked quietly. The gang's name had filtered through local rumor. Stories from neighboring counties painted them as increasingly aggressive, sometimes violent. Logan nodded, lowering his voice. "Could be. Keep your eyes open, and make sure Daniel knows. Just a precaution." A few minutes later, Mark Aldridge, Mrs. Aldridge's nephew and a nearby farmer, arrived to help Rebecca restock. "There's been talk about a biker gang on Route 27, he confided. "They look mean." Rebecca's hand drifted to her pocket, where a discreet satellite phone lay hidden, Daniel's invention, programmed with special protocols. She thought about the self-defense lessons, the training sessions in their barn, the times Daniel had explained the difference between fear and readiness. Be calm, be watchful, and know when to stand your ground. The morning continued peacefully, but an undercurrent of tension set in. Families guided their children closer. Vendors exchanged looks at every motorcycle growl in the distance. Even before the Iron Cobras appeared, Crystal Valley sensed that trouble might be coming. Just before noon, the echo of motorcycle engines rumbled across the festival grounds. Conversations died mid-sentence. Sheriff Miles tensed, resting a hand on his holster in a careful and threatening gesture. Rebecca's pulse quickened as she recalled Daniel's constant reminder. "Always keep calm when pressure builds." A line of 8 motorcycles rolled in, their riders parked in formation, a display of intimidation that signaled familiarity with coordinated tactics. At the head was Damon "Scorpion" Cole, a tall, muscular man whose serpent tattoo coiled up his neck and disappeared into his short beard. The quick, predatory glint in his eyes reminded Rebecca of photos she'd seen of special operations units. This was no disorganized gang. "Well, well," Damon said, raising his voice to be heard by every vendor within earshot. "Looks like a sweet little setup you folks have here." He scanned the booths until his gaze fell on Rebecca, noting her confident posture. Damon sauntered to her table, idly tossing an apple from hand to hand. "Name's Damon," he introduced himself with a cold smile. "Most call me Scorpion." He glanced at the sign advertising fresh produce. "What's a stand like this pay for protection nowadays?" Rebecca's grip on the apple basket tightened. "Crystal Valley doesn't need outside protection," she replied, voice steady. "We take care of our own." Damon's smile never reached his eyes. "That's what they all say, until they learn the cost of not cooperating." In a blink, he dropped the apple to the ground, crushing it under his heavy boot. The message was clear. Sheriff Miles stepped forward. "Might want to pay for that apple, friend," he said evenly. "Or what?" Damon turned slowly, assessing the sheriff's badge with casual disdain. "You planning to run me in all by yourself?" "Let's not escalate this," Miles replied, though his tone was anything but intimidated. "We pride ourselves on friendly gatherings here." In the background, Iron Cobras stationed themselves among the booths. They exuded more than mere street toughness. These men seemed methodical, disciplined, as if they'd drilled for exactly this kind of takeover. Rebecca's glance swept the rows of vendors, many of whom were frozen with uncertainty. Mrs. Aldridge stood nearby, trying to project courage. "You're new in town," Mrs. Aldridge said, voice wavering slightly but firm. "We've never had to pay for protection before." Damon chuckled. "Times change. We've got a standard rate, 20%. You pay to keep accidents from happening, and everyone goes home happy. Understand?" The hush that fell over the festival spoke volumes. It was a moment of decision for everyone present. After a few tense beats, Damon looked around, satisfied by the general atmosphere of fear. "We'll give you some time to think it over," he announced. "See you soon. Don't make us come back with a reminder." Then, as fast as they'd arrived, the Iron Cobras revved up and rumbled out, leaving a grim silence in the lingering threat of their return. In the aftermath, the festival's mood soured. Parents kept their children within arm's reach. Merchants stood close to their booths, casting nervous glances at every sound. Mrs. Aldridge approached Rebecca with trembling concern. "Should we just pack up? If this gang is as dangerous as people say—" "This is our livelihood, Mrs. Aldridge," Rebecca said gently but firmly. "We can't run every time there might be trouble. My dad taught me that much." Sheriff Miles joined them, looking older under the stress. "I've heard rumors about what the Iron Cobras did in Millbrook and Cedar Rapids. It's not just a protection racket. They move in, take over local businesses, and use towns as distribution points for illegal operations. Locals who resist end up losing everything or disappearing." Rebecca's grip tightened on a crate of tomatoes. She remembered her father's teachings about reading a threat's true intention. "They're too professional for a normal gang. Did you notice how they positioned themselves? That was military discipline." Miles nodded. "Word from the state police suggests the Iron Cobras have ex-military in their ranks. Makes sense with what we saw." "It also means they won't be easily scared off," Mark Aldridge added as he approached, concern evident on his face. "They've got training, contacts, and resources." "But we're not helpless," Rebecca replied, a quiet resolve in her tone. She looked across the festival grounds at neighbors and friends, people she had known her entire life. Each face reflected a mix of fear and determination. They might be farmers and shopkeepers, but they were also families with deep roots in Crystal Valley. She briefly considered calling Daniel. He was only 3 miles away at the farm, finishing chores. But a part of her hoped to handle this without dragging him back into a world he'd left behind. She knew, though, that his instructions were specific. If you face a real threat, use the emergency alert on the satellite phone. By noon, many vendors had nervously shut down their stands, but Rebecca stayed. Around 2 in the afternoon, the roar of more motorcycle engines echoed from the main road. Sheriff Miles tensed. "They're back. Bigger group this time." Sure enough, at least a dozen bikes rode in formation, making their way into the festival grounds. Damon Cole led them once again, and from the look on his face, he was prepared for a confrontation. Rebecca inhaled deeply and quickly typed a brief code into her satellite phone. The device sent a silent signal, something Daniel had set up in case official communications went down or the local cell towers were sabotaged. "Dad, trouble here. Iron Cobras returning. It was time. If the Iron Cobras planned to escalate, she'd be ready. And so would Daniel. On the Weston farm, 3 miles down a winding dirt road, Daniel was replacing a worn-out valve on his tractor's engine when a special vibration buzzed through the phone in his coveralls. It was a preset alarm, an alert Rebecca had never used in 5 years. Instantly, Daniel's easygoing posture changed. The retired SEAL reemerged. Checking the screen, he saw the brief text. "Dad, trouble at festival. Iron Cobras are back." He exhaled, eyes turning cold with focus. Inside the barn workshop, Daniel opened a hidden compartment. It contained a secure laptop, specialized communication gear, and a go bag, prepped for emergencies he'd hoped would never come. The presence of top-tier defensive tools might have seemed excessive for a farmer, unless one knew that Daniel Weston once led classified missions in hostile territories around the globe. He dialed a secure line. "Logan, it's Daniel. Rebecca just signaled me. Fill me in." Sheriff Miles' voice came through, tense but relieved. "They're back in force, Daniel. Definitely ex-military. They're threatening everyone unless they get a 20% cut. The rumor is they took over Millbrook in under 6 months." Daniel's laptop pinged with a data feed from an old friend, Charlie, who owed him a favor. Intel on the Iron Cobras scrolled across the screen. Ex-Army Rangers, dishonorable discharges, private security contractors turned mercenaries. Under Damon Scorpion Cole's leadership, they expanded into small rural towns, leveraging intimidation to secure strategic infrastructure, rail stations, warehouses, farmland, to move contraband or contraband-like goods without much oversight. "Sheriff," Daniel said, scanning multiple files at once, "these guys have more than a local extortion racket going. They're a paramilitary crew. Their real money likely comes from trafficking. Drugs, arms, who knows?" "Rebecca's still at the festival, refusing to back down," Miles replied. "I've got limited manpower. We need you here." "I'm on my way. Keep them talking if you can. Try not to push them into doing something rash until we have a plan." Ending the call, Daniel changed from his farm clothes into sturdy tactical boots and a reinforced jacket. Nothing too overt, but enough to offer some protection. He grabbed the old SEAL team ring from a drawer, slipping it onto his finger for the first time in years. Memories flooded back. Not the thrill of combat, but the responsibility to safeguard teammates, and now family and neighbors. He walked outside, scanning the horizon. Unmarked SUVs, likely belonging to Iron Cobra spotters, were parked at intervals near the main road. Daniel recognized the signs of a perimeter. They might think they had Crystal Valley pinned down. They had no idea that an entire community, backed by a man trained to confront threats head-on, would soon be ready for them. Back at the festival, Damon Cole paced among the stalls, arms folded across his broad chest. His men tore through crates of produce, flipping tables and making a show of force. Rebecca tried to maintain her composure. She'd learned from her father that panic only served the aggressor. "This goes beyond you not wanting trouble," Damon sneered. "We gave you a chance to pay for our protection, and you're too proud to take it. Now we have to show you what happens to prideful towns." Sheriff Miles attempted to intervene. "There's no need for violence." But one of Damon's men, a hulking figure with a mosaic of crude tattoos, grinned sadistically and smashed a wooden display. Farmers and families stood powerless, uncertain how to stop a paramilitary force without inciting worse brutality. Even so, some tried to protect their stands. Mark Aldridge stepped in front of his booth, arms spread, yelling for them to leave his goods alone. The tattooed biker shoved Mark aside with terrifying force. The crack of bone followed, and Mark collapsed, clutching his broken arm. Rebecca gasped, rushing forward to help, but Damon blocked her path. "Stay back," he warned, "unless you want more of the same." "You've proved your point," Sheriff Miles said, voice shaking with anger. "Call off your men." "You think I like doing this?" Damon asked with feigned regret. "No, but when folks don't pay, mistakes happen. Accidents even. Now you have until tomorrow morning. Everyone in Crystal Valley had better agree to our terms." Dr. Helena Rogers, the town's physician, hurried over to aid Mark. Meanwhile, the Iron Cobras systematically overturned stalls, scattering produce across the ground. They aimed to crush morale. After another few chaotic minutes, Damon raised his hands, signaling his men to stop. With stony faces, the bikers backed away, leaving a path of destruction. "Remember," Damon called as they returned to their motorcycles, "this is just a taste of what happens when you say no. Tomorrow we either collect or tear this place apart for good." The roar of engines faded and a grim hush fell over what was left of the festival. Rebecca helped Dr. Rogers get Mark into a car bound for the clinic. Fury pounded through her veins. She felt torn between her father's teaching, observe, strategize, don't rush in blind, and the raw instinct to lash out. Sheriff Miles approached. "If you haven't done it yet, call Daniel," he advised, though from his expression, he guessed she already had. She nodded. "Dad's on Giesway. This is bigger than a simple gang. Damon's men move like a military squad." Logan sighed. "We'll do what we can overnight, but they'll likely be back in force by morning." Quietly, Rebecca steeled herself. No matter how dire the threat, this was home. The Iron Cobras might have training and numbers, but they had underestimated the heart of Crystal Valley and the determination of Daniel Weston. Nightfall brought a tense stillness to Crystal Valley. Daniel arrived at the devastated festival grounds just after dusk. His calm demeanor belied the anger in his eyes at the sight of wrecked produce stands and townspeople huddled in fear. He moved quietly, stopping to speak with small groups, assuring them that help was at hand. His mere presence, tall, poised, and radiating competence, offered many a sliver of hope. Inside the old grain mill, which Sheriff Miles had hastily converted into a makeshift command post, a handful of community leaders gathered. Rebecca, Dr. Helena Rogers, and a few local farmers pored over maps of the town's roads, the railway depot, and key buildings. Daniel entered, nodding to each in turn. "First off," he began, voice low but carrying authority, "everyone needs to understand that these Iron Cobras are ex-military or mercenaries. They won't stop with a little extortion. They're here to secure distribution routes, rail, highway intersections, and storage facilities. That's how they fund their larger criminal networks." Sheriff Miles confirmed it. Mark's story matches reports from other towns. The Cobras come in, demand protection money, then seize key businesses. Before long, they're running everything, bringing in drugs, weapons, or worse, Rebecca added, which means they'll try to lock down phone lines, cell towers, and main roads. They want to ensure no one can call for outside help. Daniel pointed at the map of Crystal Valley. "We have two advantages. We know this terrain intimately, and we're all motivated to protect our homes. I suggest a coordinated defense. We can set up watchers at intersections, sabotage certain utilities if needed, and rig a few strategic spots to confuse them." Rogers frowned. "Sabotage? Are you talking about fighting them head-on?" "Not if we can avoid it," Daniel clarified. "Direct firefights with ex-military are too risky. The better approach is to disrupt their operations, confuse them, slow them down, and deny them control. We'll use subterfuge rather than brute force. If they can't move freely, can't communicate effectively, and can't establish a secure perimeter, their entire plan crumbles." Rebecca nodded, impressed despite herself at how her father had seamlessly shifted back into the role of tactical leader. She set her phone on the table. "This satellite link can't be jammed easily. It's how we'll coordinate if they start blocking regular signals." From across the table, an older farmer raised a shaking hand. "This plan, can it really stand up to men with guns and training?" Daniel's expression softened. "I've seen smaller groups hold off larger, better equipped forces with the right preparation. We have to be clever. Everyone willing to help will get instructions on what to do. If you don't feel safe, that's fine. But it'll take all of us to protect the town." Outside, wind rustled the trees. Through the grain mill's dusty windows, they glimpsed a few distant headlights, perhaps Iron Cobra scouts already patrolling. The sense of siege settled in. One thing was clear. By morning, both sides would be fully committed. In the hours before dawn, Crystal Valley underwent a quiet transformation. Daniel, Sheriff Miles, and a rotating group of volunteers dismantled normal traffic patterns with tractor equipment and hay bales, creating choke points. Working in shifts, they rewired streetlights for selective blackouts and installed hidden cameras that patched into Rebecca's secure satellite feed. Skilled farmers repurposed their knowledge of irrigation lines to flood strategic areas if needed, making them impassable for heavy vehicles. No single person knew every detail of the plan, but each knew enough to fulfill a specific role. That distributed knowledge made it harder for the Iron Cobras to single out a single leader or saboteur. Dr. Rogers, for instance, set up a secondary clinic in the basement of the town hall, anticipating that the Cobras might target the main clinic. Rebecca took charge of communications at the grain mill's makeshift command center. She relayed instructions, monitored the new camera feeds, and kept an eye on lines of encrypted text scrolling on her laptop. Occasionally, messages popped up from Daniel's contact, Charlie, confirming just how dangerous Damon Cole's network truly was. They have a system for moving high-value contraband via local businesses, Charlie wrote. Bet they plan to do the same in Crystal Valley. Watch for large trucks. Shortly after 2 a.m., watchers stationed on the outskirts reported movement. Multiple SUV convoys plus additional bikers rolling in. They parked near the railway depot and other key sites, setting up what looked like professional perimeter patrols. Daniel crouched in a dark alley with the sheriff, watched Iron Cobra members disembark. They're good, Daniel muttered quietly, noting the disciplined spacing, the silent hand signals. But they're underestimating us. They expect frightened civilians to fold at this level of intimidation. Sheriff Miles peered through binoculars. Too bad for them. We might be farmers, but we've got direction from someone who knows how to fight professionals. Across town, small teams of locals remained hidden in their homes or barns, ready to trigger sabotage on a moment's notice. Tractor engines stood by to block roads. Surplus farm machinery was repositioned to lock down intersections at the right time. Bundles of cables and random junk were placed in suspicious piles to cause confusion or possible hazards if vehicles tried to pass. Rebecca's voice came softly through Daniel's earpiece. Dad, they've started scanning frequencies. They're trying to jam local radio. Good thing we have your link. He pressed a hand to the small device in his ear. Confirmed, keep an eye on them. Once they commit to a major move, we'll trigger the surprises. Though anxiety ran high, the town was more united than ever. A single question loomed. Would the collective resolve of Crystal Valley be enough to outmaneuver the paramilitary might of the Iron Cobras? Just before sunrise, a 4-man Iron Cobra squad advanced on the railway depot, believing they would seize it quickly. Under normal circumstances, capturing a sleepy train station in a small town should have been easy. But the Cobras soon discovered the depot's power had been rerouted. Lights flickered unpredictably, and emergency systems were triggered in seemingly random zones. Each time they moved deeper into the building, gates or doors would slam shut behind them, and corridors would fill with fire suppression foam. One by one, the Cobras found themselves disoriented by bursts of water or sudden darkness. Over the secure feed, Rebecca listened as they reported to their leader, Damon Cole, in frustration. Command, the depot's been rigged. Layouts don't match our intel, and we're losing visibility. From a vantage point a block away, Daniel surveyed the scene through high-powered binoculars. His plan was going well. The depot sabotage forced the Iron Cobras to reveal more of their forces, pulling in backup squads. Damon Cole arrived personally, barking orders into a walkie-talkie. We can't let this slip, Damon growled to his men, audible over a radio channel that Sheriff Miles had intercepted. We need the railway. Secure it now. While the Cobras searched for the saboteurs, local teens used laptops and wireless routers, items repurposed from school science projects, to feed fake signals back into the Cobras' tactical systems. Men who had faced enemies abroad now found themselves undone by cunning, community-driven misdirection. Dad, Rebecca whispered over the net, their frustration level is skyrocketing. They're calling in a second wave to the depot. Good, Daniel replied. The more forces they devote to one target, the weaker they'll be elsewhere. However, he also knew they couldn't hold the depot forever against a determined paramilitary force. The sabotage was a delaying tactic, buying time for the rest of the town to implement deeper defenses. The real goal was to deny the Cobras easy access to any single point of infrastructure. At 6 a.m., the sky lightened, revealing the breadth of the Iron Cobras' presence. Additional squads had fanned out, establishing checkpoints along major roads. They set up barriers and positioned armed lookouts. Civilians who needed to move around were questioned, sometimes threatened, though actual violence remained sporadic. Damon's men still hoped intimidation alone would suffice. At the depot, the second wave of Cobras fought through foam-filled corridors and a labyrinth of newly installed false walls. One infuriated operator shouted through the comms, "Whoever rigged this place knows our standard playbook. Request permission to escalate." "Escalate," Damon said flatly. "Use everything you need, no more messing around." Daniel exhaled and glanced at Sheriff Miles. They're about to drop the subtlety. That's when they're most dangerous, but also when they'll make mistakes. With the railway depot still in chaos, Damon Cole shifted tactics to clamp down on the entire town. The Iron Cobras deployed signal jammers at 4 major intersections, intending to block phone calls and internet. Unmarked SUVs hauled equipment into place, forming small command posts in strategic spots. Patrols roamed the streets, ordering citizens back into their homes. Despite the intimidation, many residents stayed at the hidden vantage points assigned by Daniel and Sheriff Miles the night before. Mrs. Aldridge kept a watch from her attic window, noting each patrol's timing and sharing that intel over a secret landline that bypassed standard phone lines. Others used walkie-talkies rigged to frequencies outside the Cobra's typical scanning range. Rebecca maintained her position in the old grain mill, juggling multiple camera feeds displayed across laptop screens. She could see Iron Cobra squads rotating their patrols methodically, ex-military men applying typical perimeter discipline. They covered blind spots, set up overlapping fields of view, and used mobile radios to coordinate. But all the while, the infiltration of advanced jamming technology caused them to jam each other's signals inadvertently. Each added piece of gear introduced new frequencies, further tangling their communications. "They're overloading their own networks," she told Daniel via the satellite link. "It's a mess on their side." Meanwhile, Mark Aldridge, his arm in a makeshift cast from Dr. Rogers, insisted on staying in the fight, offering remote support. He sifted through city utility data, flipping circuit breakers at critical junctions to create power surges that triggered partial blackouts around Iron Cobra checkpoints. "Move to generator," a Cobra voice snapped over a newly cracked radio channel. "We're losing main power in Sector 3. Daniel, crouched in a supply shed near the main road, watched as 2 SUVs peeled away to investigate the electrical disruptions. "Yes," he murmured, "they're splitting their forces." Sheriff Miles from another location confirmed the shift. "I'm counting fewer Cobras at the major intersections, Daniel. They're starting to chase the ghost signals we set up." Still, there was an undercurrent of danger. The Iron Cobras carried sidearms, shotguns, and rifles suitable for close-quarters urban control. If cornered or humiliated, Damon's men could unleash real violence. Daniel prayed it wouldn't come to that, but prepared for the worst. At dawn's first clear light, a short lull settled over the town. Many frightened citizens peeked out windows to see men in dark clothing pacing the streets or stationed by vehicles. A standoff hovered, precarious. On one side, a small paramilitary force with training, weaponry, and a willingness to be brutal. On the other, a tightly woven community, harnessing local knowledge and guided by a retired SEAL who wasn't afraid to fight on his own turf. Shortly after 7 a.m., Damon Cole realized his men were bogged down in too many micro-conflicts. The depot was only partially under control, roadblocks were draining manpower, and communications were rife with interference. Surveying the chaos from a commandeered RV that functioned as a mobile command center, he barked at his radio operator, "Initiate final containment protocols. No more games." The shift in their approach was instant. Several teams, heretofore spread thin, consolidated into a heavier strike force. They set their sights on the largest open area in town, the festival grounds. Damon figured that taking complete control of that central hub would intimidate the rest of the population into surrender. "They're pulling men to the old festival site," Rebecca updated Daniel. "Heavy vehicles, too, like they're planning to turn it into a staging area." Daniel signaled to the small squads waiting in side streets. "Prepare for the fallback plan. Let them gather in one spot, then we cut off their supply lines." Over the next 20 minutes, the Iron Cobras rolled into the empty festival grounds, setting up tents, communications gear, and makeshift barricades. Damon strode around, pointing at streets leading out of the square. Bikers quickly positioned themselves at each exit. His tactic was a classic show of force. However, exactly as Daniel anticipated, Grouping so many men in one area left them less flexible. The sabotage that had plagued them all night continued around town. A sudden surge in the power grid dropped coverage in the festival area, while the rest of Crystal Valley's main streets inexplicably stayed lit. Cameras that Damon tried to install to watch the roads failed to link up with the jammers. Tension within the gang spiked, each man looking for someone to blame. Rebecca, monitoring from the mill, allowed herself a small smile. She recalled all the nights Daniel had spent teaching her about operational choke points and force dispersion. The Iron Cobras were discovering the hazards of applying standard military doctrine to a place where the defenders wrote the rules. Out of frustration, Damon ordered immediate offensive sweeps across the side streets, trying to flush out anyone behind the sabotage. "No more half measures," he roared over his command channel. "Search every building if you have to." This was exactly what Daniel had hoped for, an overreaction that forced smaller Cobra squads to roam blindly. Each squad that ventured into the spiderweb of narrow roads found themselves stalled by roadblocks, unexpected detours, and booby traps that were more nuisance than lethal, but turned them around in circles. Meanwhile, main roads saw tractors, pickup trucks, and even old combines blocking access points entirely. In a flurry of frantic messages, the Iron Cobras realized they were losing control, not gaining it. They had superior weaponry, but each time they tried to concentrate, the townspeople melted away, only to pop up elsewhere, messing with the power, water, or even diverting patrols by false sightings. Damon, pacing near a flickering streetlight in the festival grounds, smashed his fist into the side of a van. "Find the person leading this resistance, or we lose everything." It wasn't long before Damon Cole's men traced the pattern of sabotage to the old grain mill. They converged on the site in two armored SUVs, accompanied by half a dozen heavily armed bikers. Bursting inside, they found only a skeleton crew of townspeople and Dr. Rogers, who feigned ignorant terror. Meanwhile, Rebecca had relocated half an hour prior, monitoring from a hidden location. Daniel, however, chose to remain, standing near a back entrance, arms folded. He wore his worn seal ring and a calm expression. Damon stepped forward, flanked by gunmen, his gaze narrowing on the older man. "So you're the one behind all this? A washed-up soldier boy who thinks he can outsmart me?" "Name's Daniel Weston," he replied coolly. "And yes, I've been coordinating your headaches. This is my home. You threatened my daughter, my friends, and my town. I don't let that stand." Damon's lips curled in a sneer. "Brave. Or stupid. This ends now." He nodded to a subordinate who lifted a rifle. Sheriff Miles, previously hidden behind a stack of feed sacks, emerged with his pistol drawn. "Drop it, you're surrounded." The henchman hesitated, glancing at the sheriff's badge. Damon snorted. "You think we haven't faced law enforcement before? We're ex-military ourselves." Daniel maintained his calm, stepping closer. "Law enforcement is one thing. A community that knows every inch of this territory is another." Gun barrels shifted uncertainly. The bikers had expected either cowering civilians or standard-issue police tactics. Instead, they found something else, an entire defensive network that had adapted everything, power lines, building layouts, even farmland, to sabotage them. "Don't force a shootout," Daniel warned, voice laced with the iron certainty of a man who'd seen real combat. "If you pull that trigger, you'll never leave this town, and your bosses, whoever they are, will lose a lot more than a small piece of territory." Conflicting emotions flashed across Damon's face. He had the advantage in sheer firepower, yet every move they made today had been met with cunning, unrelenting resistance. A single bullet fired here could bring the entire operation under national scrutiny, not to mention an avalanche of local retaliation. The Iron Cobras thrive by terrorizing towns, not fighting entrenched defenders prepared to broadcast their every misstep. He made a harsh decision. "Fine, we'll regroup," he spat. "But don't think this is over. My employers will not be happy about this mess, and if the feds sniff around, we'll be back." With a calculated glare at Daniel and the sheriff, Damon shouted orders for his men to withdraw. They backed away, rifles half raised, stepping outside into the dawn light. SUVs revved. The noise receded into the distance, leaving the grain mill and the battered festival grounds behind. For a moment, no one moved. Then Dr. Rogers exhaled, shaking. That might have gone a lot worse. Daniel glanced around. It's not done. They'll cut their losses here, but the question is how much evidence we've gathered and whether they'll try to erase it. In the aftermath, as the Iron Cobras retreated, Daniel rapidly connected with his contact Charlie, uploading every shred of data and recordings the town had collected. The images of armed bikers, the overheard radio transmissions, the confiscated notes on distribution routes, together these painted a damning picture of Damon Cole's operation. Rebecca worked side by side with Sheriff Miles in the old grain mill's improvised war room, finalizing the data transmissions. If the feds get hold of this, she said, they'll see that these guys are more than a gang. They're ex-military contractors running smuggling and extortion rings across several states. Within hours, the scale of what Crystal Valley had uncovered became clear. Federal agencies reached out, requesting statements and secure handoffs of evidence. Specialized teams were dispatched to investigate the Iron Cobras' holdings in other counties, now armed with real proof of their crimes. Dr. Rogers fielded local injuries, broken arms, bruised ribs, and a few cases of shock. But miraculously, no one was killed. The Iron Cobras had counted on intimidation, not a prolonged firefight, which had limited the violence. This time, Mark Aldridge, arm in a sling, voiced what many were feeling. I still can't believe we held them off. They were so organized, so dangerous. Daniel gave him a reassuring nod. Disorganized force can't beat well-trained professionals, but an entire community using home turf knowledge and creative tactics? That's a different story. They never expected us to fight back on those terms. Sheriff Miles exhaled, shoulders finally lowering. We should expect retaliation, right? Damon won't forget this. He might try something, Daniel conceded, but once federal agents start pulling on the threads we gave them, the Iron Cobras' top priority will be covering their tracks. They operate a bigger network than just Crystal Valley. If the feds crumble that network, Damon will have bigger concerns than us. Meanwhile, in Millbrook, Cedar Rapids, and other small towns, the files forwarded by Daniel and Rebecca triggered new investigations. Many of the Iron Cobras' shell companies, front businesses, and supply routes face sudden scrutiny. You realize you may have helped bring down a multi-state criminal enterprise, Dr. Rogers noted, a mix of awe and fatigue in her voice. Rebecca looked at Daniel. We did what we had to protect our home. The father offered a small smile of pride. Exactly, and if it helps people in other places, so much the better. Outside, the first hints of normalcy returned. A few families ventured out, slowly clearing debris and salvaging what they could from the ravaged festival booths. Soldiers didn't occupy the streets now, just neighbors, collectively sighing in relief that their midnight ordeal had ended. In the days that followed, Crystal Valley's cleanup went hand in hand with the arrival of state and federal investigators. Sheriff Miles spent long hours providing detailed statements, while Daniel and Rebecca handed over the satellite phone recordings, camera footage, and troves of digital evidence. As more of the Iron Cobras' background came to light, the media descended on Crystal Valley, reporters seeking the little town that stood up to professional criminals. Most residents shied from interviews. They were private people, not eager to relive the tense nights. Still, a narrative formed about how a former Navy SEAL and his determined daughter galvanized a community into resisting a takeover by heavily armed outlaws. Federal officers questioned Daniel closely about the methods employed. He explained calmly that everything he'd done was legal, using farmland, personal property, and local infrastructure in ways that simply inconvenienced a criminal force. We never set out to start a war, he said, just to ensure they had no easy path to controlling our town. Across the region, law enforcement raids on Iron Cobra-linked warehouses and motels netted further evidence. Damon Cole and his core group evaded immediate capture, but their paramilitary enterprise faced crippling damage. Whispers suggested Cole was on the run, his finances drying up, and his protectors turning their backs to avoid prosecution. Senator Rogers treated lingering injuries in a volunteer-run clinic. She also noted how, ironically, crisis had bonded the townspeople. Neighbors who barely spoke now rely on each other. That sense of solidarity may be our best defense moving forward, Martin. Mark Aldridge, proudly wearing a cast that was covered in supportive signatures. helped fix broken fences and stands. He wasn't alone in this. Men, women, and teenagers pitched in, hammering nails, cleaning up, and ensuring the festival area could be restored by next season. They were determined not to let the Iron Cobras' assault break their spirit. Rebecca found herself in a leadership role she never anticipated, coordinating with state investigators, scheduling press visits, and reassuring anxious neighbors. She reflected on her father's blend of farmland calm and SEAL intensity. "I see him differently now," she admitted to Sheriff Miles one afternoon. "All those nights he couldn't sleep. He was carrying burdens from his past missions, but also preparing to make sure I'd never be helpless." Logan Miles gave a knowing smile. "We're lucky he never lost that sense of duty." Meanwhile, Daniel continued to patch up the farm. He quietly removed advanced surveillance gear from certain corners of the property, stowing it away in the barn's hidden compartment once more. The direct danger had passed, but he remained vigilant. Sometimes in the still of dusk, he scanned the horizon, mindful that Damon's threat could resurface if any piece of the shattered network tried to reconstitute itself. One warm evening, not long after the Iron Cobras' retreat, Rebecca found Daniel standing by the edge of a field behind their farmhouse. The sky glowed with the last hues of sunset, and cicadas buzzed in the tall grass. Approaching quietly, she noticed he was wearing the seal ring, a habit he'd revived since the confrontation. "Dad," she said gently, "you okay?" He turned, the faintest smile on his face. "Yeah, I am." His gaze swept over the farmland. "This place? It's always been where I wanted to find peace. I thought I left that warrior life behind." She nodded. "But it turns out we needed that part of you. Without your guidance, we'd never have mounted a defense in time." Daniel looked down at the ring. "I guess part of me will always be a SEAL, but I don't regret leaving. I did it so you could grow up in a safe, stable world." He paused, a flicker of sadness crossing his face. "Maybe I hoped we'd never see real violence here." Rebecca understood. "We faced it as a community, and I think that's what won. No single person could have done it alone." He turned to her, pride evident in his eyes. "You led them as much as I did. I saw how you handled the festival, how you used the phones, how you stayed calm even when it got scary. I realized you were applying everything I taught you, everything you learned here in Crystal Valley too." A comfortable silence followed. Crickets chirped. The farm's perimeter lights glowed softly, reminiscent of the subtle security systems Daniel had once installed overseas. "So do you think it's over?" Rebecca asked at last. "Hard to say," he admitted. "Damon Cole might be out there, but now that federal agencies are involved, he has bigger problems than one small town. If the network is truly dismantled, he won't have the resources to come back. And if he tries, well," Rebecca gave a slight grin, "we'll be ready." Father and daughter shared a moment of unspoken understanding. Their bond, forged by love and tempered by crisis, had proven stronger than any threat. The rest of Crystal Valley, likewise, had emerged battered but not broken, more united than ever. In the weeks that followed, the Harvest Festival Committee met to plan a resilience celebration, a smaller event aimed at reviving the town's spirit. Even the youngest kids pitched in, painting bright signs that read, "We stand together." And the day after that celebration, when out-of-towners asked how Crystal Valley had driven away a gang of ex-military operators, the answers varied. Some said it was the father-daughter duo who outsmarted them. Others praised the sheriff's steady leadership. A few called it a miracle born from generations of grit. But to Rebecca Weston, it was simple. If you threaten a loved one, especially the child of a retired Navy SEAL, you'd better be prepared for an entire community to rise, forging everyday courage into an unbreakable shield. And when the Iron Cobras realized that truth, it was already too late for them to prevail. From my perspective, witnessing Crystal Valley's triumph over the Iron Cobras shows that unity and heart can overcome even the most daunting odds. When everything seemed lost, Daniel Weston's unshakable resolve and Rebecca's sharp intuition inspired neighbors to pool their skills and stand firm. The result? A victory that protected not just their livelihoods, but the spirit that keeps small communities alive. Looking back on the festival's chaos and how the townspeople rallied, I'm reminded that real strength lies in everyday people who care enough to act. Even in the face of advanced tactics and overwhelming firepower, Faith in one another carried the day. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the simplest acts, banding together, sharing knowledge, and refusing to give in, are what truly make a difference. What do you think of Crystal Valley's story? Share your thoughts below and let's keep the discussion going. Your insights and ideas can spark even more stories worth telling.